Welcome to Insights. I'm Adam Rivers.
And I'm Sarah Collins. In this episode, we'll reflect carefully on the Qur'an, verse by verse, focusing on wording, context, and coherence. Insights is a journey into the profound psychological, social, and spiritual layers of revelation. We don't just look at the surface of the words. We explore the complex and often hidden mechanisms of human nature they reveal.
Right.
Previously, we explored the psychology of those who claim to be peacemakers while, actually spreading corruption, and how sheer arrogance blinds them to the reality of their own actions. We basically uncovered the terrifying capacity of the human mind to completely deceive itself.
Yeah, rationalizing destructive behavior as, brilliant societal construction.
Exactly.
Well, today we reflect on chapter 2, verse 14 of the Quran. The translation reads, "And when they meet those who believe, they say, 'We believe.' But when they're alone with their evil ones, they say, 'Indeed, we are with you. We were only mockers.'" So what happens to the human mind when we use words not as a mirror of our heart, but as a mask to survive different social circles?
Thinking about that overarching theme, we are clearly not just looking at a random, isolated lie here.
No, not at all.
This feels like a deeply entrenched way of moving through the world, right?
Right.
A survival mechanism that has completely taken over. What is the fundamental behavior being exposed here?
Have you ever noticed someone who instantly changes their entire personality depending on who just walked into the room?
Oh, definitely, like flipping a switch.
Exactly. The revelation is addressing a deeply ingrained, recurring social habit. We know this because it opens with the word when, which, signals a continuous patterned loop of behavior.
Right.
These are individuals who have basically weaponized language. They use words purely as tools for adaptation rather than as actual expressions of truth. They constantly shift their vocabulary, their tone, and even their stated values to perfectly match whatever audience is standing in front of them.
Just calculating what works.
Right, calculating that this social chameleon act guarantees their safety and elevates their status, but prioritizing adaptation over truth.
Wait, so the lack of authenticity doesn't just protect them, it actually completely erases their core identity.
Yes, absolutely. It erases it. Living with two faces biologically and psychologically means living with no true face at all.
Wow.
When you constantly mold your neural pathways and your outward behavior to fit the expectations of others, you hollow out your own center. Eventually, there's absolutely no real person left behind the performance.
That makes you think of the classic workplace chameleon. We have all encountered that one colleague who suddenly adopts the exact personal values, hobbies, and even political opinions of whoever happens to be the boss that year.
Oh yeah, the office shapeshifter.
Right. Like if the new director is a ruthless corporate shark, they act ruthless. If the next director talks endlessly about empathy and emotional intelligence, they suddenly become the office empathy champion.
It's exhausting to watch.
It really is. And observing that mechanism is fascinating because of what happens to trust. When you observe someone doing that, you realize their loyalty is entirely transactional. It begs a terrifying question for all of us.
What's that?
If you ever find yourself engaging in that level of code switching just to survive a social environment, do you still recognize the person looking back at you in the mirror at the end of the day?
That's a heavy thought.
It is, and that total erasure of identity has to make genuine encounters incredibly jarring. When an individual built entirely on performance is forced to stand in front of someone who is fundamentally grounded and authentic, what's the psychological reaction?
Well, why do we instinctively feel nervous when standing in front of deeply honest people?
It's intimidating, for sure.
Right? The Arabic word used in the Revelation here for meet is lak. Understanding its linguistic weight is really crucial. This isn't just casually passing someone on the street.
Like a polite nod?
Exactly, not just a nod from across the room. Lak implies a sudden, forced eye-to-eye confrontation. It is an unavoidable moment of profound physical and psychological presence. When a two-faced person is suddenly intercepted by believers, people whose internal convictions perfectly match their outward actions, those genuine individuals act as a terrifying mirror.
Oh, wow.
The hypocrite immediately panics. Seeing someone who is completely whole harshly illuminates their own fragmented, hollow reality.
Right, it exposes them.
And that triggers a frantic rush to throw up a defensive shield of words before the silence can actually expose them.
The somatic response to that kind of exposure is so universal. Just imagine bumping into a highly respected mentor, someone whose integrity you deeply admire, you know?
The worst timing possible.
Exactly. You bump into them right at the exact moment you are engaged in something ethically questionable or lazy. Your stomach drops, your heart rate spikes, and what is your immediate human instinct? You start over-explaining.
You talk incredibly fast.
Yes. You throw up this massive, complex wall of justifications and context before they even have the chance to ask a single question. Your brain is trying to preemptively fill the silent judgment you just assume is happening.
It's an exhausting, adrenaline-fueled way to navigate life, constantly bracing for that inevitable eye-to-eye collision with the truth.
Definitely. So in that moment of sheer panic, their defensive shield is really fascinating to me. Why do they choose to state their belief so definitively? Like, why not just say they're interested or exploring or just learning?
Think about it like this. What does a sick person say when they are absolutely terrified of the doctor's diagnosis?
I'm totally fine.
Exactly. They say, I'm completely fine. You don't need to examine me. Here, the absolute statement, we believe, serves the exact same psychological function, is a definitive lock on the door against any further scrutiny or meaningful dialogue.
That makes sense.
They do not say, teach us, or we're trying to understand, because vulnerability requires openness.
Right, and they can't afford that.
Yeah. By declaring a finished, absolute state of faith, they attempt to violently shut down the conversation entirely. They exaggerate their belonging because the alternative is engaging in a deeply uncomfortable, transformative questioning of their own hollow lives.
Yeah.
Making this definitive claim is the perfect barrier.
So it turns language from a bridge into a padlock.
Precisely.
It is exactly like being in a deep, highly emotionally charged disagreement with someone, and right when you are getting to the root of the issue, they suddenly throw their hands up and say, you know what, I completely agree with every single thing you're saying.
You're 100% right.
Exactly. They don't actually agree with you. They just desperately want the uncomfortable conversation to end that very second. They throw the ultimate absolute concession at you to shut the door. It's a highly effective manipulation tactic.
Because it leaves you with nowhere to go.
Right. You can't argue with total agreement, even when you know it's completely hollow. So once that intense public performance concludes, the adrenaline fades, and they manage to escape the confrontation, where does that nervous energy go? Where do they retreat?
Where does a person run when they can't stand the deafening silence of their own mind?
Anywhere but a quiet room, I imagine.
You would rationally assume that escaping such immense social pressure would lead them to seek out peaceful solitude to decompress. But the revelation astutely notes they don't retreat into quiet reflection. They retreat to their evil ones.
Wow, straight into toxicity.
Yeah. True solitude is incredibly dangerous and utterly terrifying for someone living a fabricated life, because silence inevitably awakens the conscience.
That makes sense. The quiet forces you to look at yourself.
Exactly. If they were to sit completely alone in a quiet room, the crushing weight of their guilt and the reality of their hypocrisy would destroy them. Therefore, they are compelled to actively seek out highly toxic company.
To distract themselves.
Right? They require a very specific environment of noise and validation to numb the guilt and refuel their deceptive energy for the next performance.
We see this exact avoidance mechanism play out constantly in modern life. Think about what happens when you feel a sharp twinge of guilt about a mistake you made or a lie you told.
You reach for your phone.
Instantly, it is so incredibly common to immediately pick up your phone and open a toxic social media echo chamber. Or, immediately text that one specific friend who always enables your worst habits.
Because they'll validate you.
Yes, you do it to avoid the quiet room of your own self-reflection. You surround yourself with digital noise or sycophantic friends who will quickly assure you that you did nothing wrong. It is a deliberate, calculated escape from personal accountability.
Absolutely.
So looking at the linguistic precision of the revelation here, it's striking. It uses a very specific preposition to describe this retreat, stating they go to their evil ones. Why is the mechanics of that specific word so deeply important?
Is moving from one room to another just a change of scenery or a change of allegiance?
Oh, that's a great question.
The preposition to, which is ila in Arabic linguistics, implies a highly deliberate seeking of refuge. It is not merely a description of physical movement.
Okay.
It signifies an active, desperate transfer of loyalty and spiritual direction. They are not passively or accidentally ending up in bad company. They are fiercely fleeing toward it for emotional protection and ideological validation.
So they are running toward a specific destination.
Right. The evil ones mentioned here are not abstract whispered temptations in the back of their minds. They represent an influential network with social authority where masks can be dropped.
Hold on, so these devils aren't just abstract evil thoughts, but actual people with social capital and influence.
Yeah, they possess real power. In this precise context, the terminology refers to powerful human networks. It's people of influence, systemic power, or shared cynicism who provide a safe, impenetrable haven for this two-faced behavior.
Wow.
They are the social circles that actively reward and protect the deception.
That completely shifts the entire perspective of the psychological landscape. It forces you to look at your own professional or social networks through a much more critical lens.
It really does.
We are often taught to fight our inner demons, but sometimes the most highly destructive influences in our lives are sitting right across from us at a dinner party, pouring us a drink, and validating our worst, most cynical instincts. We actively migrate to them when we want explicit permission to lower our moral standards.
Without facing any judgment.
Exactly. And the phrasing takes it a step further. It specifically calls them their evil ones. What does that possessive framing reveal about the architecture of this relationship?
Well, is it possible we accidentally curate our own echo chambers of enablers?
I think we probably do it more than we realize.
Definitely. The use of the possessive pronoun there is a brilliant and terrifying psychological detail. It clearly indicates a deep, meticulously cultivated, and highly familiar relationship.
It's not an accident.
Not at all. These individuals haven't just stumbled into a random group of bad influences by chance. They have actively chosen, built, and invested in a world that perfectly justifies their masks.
Turning them into their own personal safety net.
Right, turning those corrupt influences into their personal, comfortable enablers. It implies a long-term symbiotic investment in a social circle that absolutely guarantees their hypocrisy will never be challenged. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement of moral decay.
That brings up the profound, often overlooked danger of curating friendships solely based on who makes us feel comfortable. Human beings naturally gravitate toward the path of least resistance.
We like things easy.
Exactly. If you systematically eliminate every person in your life who challenges you and only surround yourself with people who will never, ever call out your bad behavior, you are essentially cultivating your enablers.
A custom-made echo chamber.
Yes, an echo chamber of decay. You have to step back and audit your life. Do the people I proudly call mine push me toward uncomfortable truths? Or do they just help me adjust my mask so it fits better? Because if your inner circle's primary function is to make you feel completely justified in your flaws, that circle is silently destroying your potential for growth.
That's a really powerful audit to do.
So once they are safely locked inside this curated private circle, the first thing they say is, "Indeed, we are with you." Why this specific reassurance, and why is it their immediate priority?
If someone truly changed for the better, wouldn't they hesitate before sliding back into old habits?
Yeah, you'd think there'd be some friction.
Absolutely, there would be immense internal friction and a noticeable delay. But here, the revelation highlights that they immediately declare, "Indeed, we are with you," which conclusively proves the prior claim of belief was purely theatrical.
Wow, so no hesitation at all.
None. There is absolutely no inner conflict, no lingering moral hesitation, and no intellectual debate upon returning to the toxic circle. Instead, there is a desperate, rushed, almost pathetic need to reassure their corrupt network that they haven't changed at all.
That's fascinating.
They are deeply terrified of losing their standing, protection, and status in this cynical network, so they aggressively and instantly reaffirm their loyalty the absolute second the doors are safely closed.
You see the mechanics of this dynamic so vividly in toxic office gossip or cliquey environments?
Oh, all the time.
Imagine an employee who is caught in the hallway being genuinely kind, empathetic, and helpful to the new hire that the established office clique has already decided to ostracize. The absolute moment that employee returns to the break room and faces the clique, they immediately backpedal in a panic.
I was just pretending.
Exactly. They say, "Oh, I was just playing the corporate game. You know, I can't actually stand them. I was just gathering intel." They rush to assure the toxic group that their fleeting moment of genuine human kindness was entirely fake. It is deeply tragic having to profusely apologize for being good just to maintain a fragile status.
Just to fit in with a profoundly negative environment.
Yeah, and embedded right within that rushed reassurance is the phrase "with you." The preposition "with" carries a lot of weight. What is the heavy, absolute implication of that alignment?
Can anyone be truly neutral when core values are on the line?
I don't think so, no.
The word with implies total alignment, shared destiny, and absolute partisanship. The great exhausting tragedy of hypocrisy is the immense cognitive effort spent allocating perfectly tailored, reassuring language to absolutely everyone, desperately trying to play all sides.
It sounds completely draining.
It is. Yet, despite this exhausting public performance of neutrality or universal agreement, the heart remains exclusively anchored to one side. The true alignment is always with the faction that offers worldly power, immediate protection, or a cynical feeling of superiority.
So they say one thing but mean another entirely.
Right. They say, "We believe," to one group as a deflector shield, but they say, "We are with you," to the other as a statement of true identity.
Think about how utterly, overwhelmingly exhausting it must be to exist like that every single day. Imagine carrying a massive ring of heavy keys, and every single person you interact with requires a different key, a different customized mask, a different carefully calibrated set of political or social opinions.
Just managing perceptions all day long.
Yes, distributing these highly manicured, fake versions of yourself to control other people's perceptions drains all of your vital energy. The cognitive load is staggering. How much easier, how much infinitely lighter would life be if you just shared the unvarnished truth, stood your ground, and let the chips fall exactly where they may?
So much lighter.
But simply surviving in that toxic circle isn't enough, is it? To prove they belong, they have to go on the offensive. They don't just pledge loyalty. They add, "We were only mockers." Why do they escalate to this extreme?
Why isn't it enough for a liar to just lie? Why do they feel the psychological need to turn it into a joke?
That's a really dark pivot.
It is. Declaring "we were only mockers" is an act of severe, calculated psychological aggression. It's no longer just an act of self-preservation. It has become an offensive attack.
Okay.
By systematically reducing sincere belief and genuine moral values to a cheap comedy routine, they are strategically aiming to destroy societal respect for actual values.
Wait, so humor is actually being weaponized here to make a society ashamed of having morals in the first place?
Yes, absolutely. Sarcasm and mockery are incredibly effective tools for deconstructing values without ever having to engage them logically or intellectually. If you could successfully make a virtue look like a ridiculous joke, you strip away its inherent dignity.
Wow, that's incredibly toxic.
Once a society is conditioned to feel embarrassed or naive for upholding a standard, that standard inevitably collapses. It is a highly calculated, silent destruction of ethics through laughter.
That mechanism is so unbelievably relevant to our current reality. If you look at modern digital discourse, sincere, long-form debate is practically extinct.
It's all just memes now.
Right. It has been almost entirely replaced by sneering, deeply cynical memes and endless, exhausting sarcasm. If someone posts something genuinely heartfelt, vulnerable, or principled online, the immediate default response is a tidal wave of ironic mockery.
Just to tear it down.
Exactly. It's exactly as you described. Weaponized humor intentionally meant to shame people out of caring about anything deeply. It really makes you wonder, are we using irony as a cultural shield because we are collectively too terrified to actually stand for something real and risk being mocked ourselves?
And I think a lot of people are.
Now, the linguistic structure of the Arabic word for mockers reveals something even deeper about how this defense mechanism alters them permanently. What does the grammar expose here?
What happens when a defense mechanism permanently becomes a personality trait?
It takes over entirely.
Yeah. The revelation uses an active participle form for the word mockers. In the mechanics of Arabic grammar, this specific structure signifies that the action isn't just a fleeting thing they did once to escape an awkward situation.
Okay, so it's not a one-time event.
Right. It has evolved into a constant, defining, permanent characteristic. Mockery have metastasized into their very identity. It functions as an omnipresent shield.
Wow.
Whenever they are confronted with genuine conviction, beauty, or truth, their default, automatic, involuntary reflex is disdain. They have internalized this sneering posture so deeply into their neurology that they simply do not know how to engage with the world earnestly anymore.
It is truly terrifying when a defense mechanism completely swallows the whole person. You see this happen over decades. A person might start by using a little bit of sarcasm to deflect awkward criticism in high school.
Just a small deflection.
Right. But 20 years later, because that neural pathway has been reinforced thousands of times, they literally cannot express genuine affection to their spouse or handle a serious conversation with their child without deflecting it into a self-deprecating or cynical joke.
It becomes their only lens.
Yes, the mockery stops being a tool in their toolbox and becomes the absolute only lens through which they can view reality. They lose the fundamental human capacity for sincerity entirely. So if we trace this behavior back, how does this specific cynical posture connect to the themes that the revelation established in the passages immediately preceding this one?
When someone calls you a fool, is it just a careless slip of the tongue or a symptom of a much deeper systemic disease?
Usually a symptom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we trace the continuity of the preceding context, we see these exact same individuals were previously described as calling the believers fools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we are witnessing that initial internal contempt rapidly evolving into outright vocalized mockery in their private gatherings.
The progression is clear.
The singular root cause connecting these escalating behaviors is profound, blinding arrogance. Arrogance acts as a psychological blinder. It makes them view faith, integrity, and absolute moral commitment as childish, simplistic games that they are inherently and intellectually above.
So they think they're smarter than everyone else.
They genuinely, deeply believe their deceptive maneuvering and social flexibility makes them vastly superior to those who choose to live simply and honestly.
Arrogance really is the ultimate deceptive blinder. It creates this impenetrable illusion where a person feels completely untouchable, convinced they're the smartest person in the room, playing 4D chess with everyone else's emotions.
Meanwhile, they're decaying inside.
Exactly. In reality, their core is morally decaying. They fundamentally mistake their own toxic cynicism for high-level wisdom. If you think about the people in your life or in public discourse who constantly obsessively look down on other people's earnest efforts, that superiority complex is almost always a thin, fragile cover for a deep, hollow emptiness and insecurity inside themselves.
It's just a projection.
Absolutely. So, what specific internal emotional purpose does this mockery serve for the hypocrite? Like, why is it so desperately necessary for their survival?
Well, how do you drown out the terrifying quiet sound of your own guilt?
You make noise.
Right. Mockery provides a highly effective, albeit wildly temporary, false sense of superiority. It successfully and chemically numbs the contents.
Like a drug.
Exactly like a drug.
Ugh.
When you actively laugh at the very people you are deceiving, you cognitively convince yourself that you are the one in control and that they are beneath you. This momentarily silences the agonizing guilt of lying to them.
But it doesn't last, does it?
No. Using laughter to cover a deep moral wound only guarantees that the infection will spread. Over time, it completely destroys their internal compass, eventually rendering them completely incapable of facing reality or their own reflection without experiencing severe, paralyzing psychological pain.
It is the classic tragic cycle of the constant cynic. We all know someone who aggressively uses self-deprecating humor or dark, cynical jokes to actively avoid processing real, severe ethical failings or deep past trauma.
Yeah, deflection through humor.
Right. If you try to sit them down and have a serious, grounded conversation about how their specific actions deeply hurt someone, they immediately deflect with a joke. They are laughing loudly, but the laughter is a reinforced steel wall. It's an emotional anesthetic. But all anesthetics eventually wear off, and when they do, the unhealed wound is still festering there.
And it's usually worse than before.
Exactly. The reality is far worse than it was before the joke. So, looking at the brilliant structural symmetry of the revelation here, the stark contrast between the public encounter and the secret retreat, the shifting statements, what does this architecture reveal about the reality of their internal state?
Can a person burdened with two faces ever truly rest?
I can't imagine they could.
They can't. The precise symmetrical structure of the phrasing, beautifully juxtaposing their public encounter with their secret retreat and strictly contrasting what they say in the light versus what they desperately whisper in the dark, highlights a state of immense, unbearable psychological torment.
Okay.
True. Lasting peace only arrives when a person's internal reality and outward expression perfectly match. Hypocrites, however, are condemned by their own design to a life of endless, vibrating anxiety. They must constantly, obsessively track which mask they wore for which audience.
So their supposed social cleverness is actually just them building their own psychological prison.
Precisely. They genuinely believe they are masterfully manipulating the social game, but they are actually submitting themselves to constant, paralyzing paranoia.
Oh, wow.
The sheer mental processing power and cognitive load required to sustain a complex, intercepting web of tailored lies is exhausting. They are never, for a single second, truly free.
It really is a self-imposed maximum security prison. Imagine the sheer, crushing mental load of waking up every single morning and having to furiously review your mental notes. Okay, what exact version of my political beliefs did I tell my family? What sanitized version did I tell my colleagues? What cynical version did I tell my private friends?
It sounds impossible to keep up with.
It's like trying to perfectly juggle a dozen glass balls over a concrete floor while blindfolded. One tiny mistake, one forgotten lie, one crossed wire between social groups, and the entire fabricated identity shatters into a million pieces. The quiet, boring piece of just being one single person everywhere all the time is an incredibly underrated luxury.
It truly is a luxury.
Beyond the crushing individual torment, what is the broader systemic ripple effect of this dual life on the community at large?
What happens to the fundamental fabric of a community when words completely lose their way?
Trust disappears.
Exactly. When language is stripped of its meaning, and words become mere tactical tools of deception, and when objective truth is subjected to constant, sneering mockery, the foundational trust of an entire society rapidly erodes.
That's a scary thought.
The revelation frequently addresses a profound concept of hidden corruption on Earth. This isn't about obvious physical destruction like burning buildings or toppling bridges. It is the silent, insidious demolition of the basic interpersonal trust required for human coexistence.
Right.
If language can no longer be fundamentally relied upon, every contract, every promise, and every intimate relationship dissolves. The community inevitably fragments into highly isolated, deeply suspicious individuals.
A society entirely devoid of trust is an incredibly bleak, terrifying place to exist. Imagine trying to live in a culture where absolutely every promise is automatically assumed to be a lie. Every basic business contract is treated with deep, paranoid suspicion, and every intimate relationship is constantly shadowed by the fear of hidden motives.
You'd go crazy.
You really would. You would have to spend half of your waking life just independently verifying if people actually mean what they say. That is the true invisible corruption. The physical infrastructure of a city, the roads, the buildings, the technology might be absolute perfection. But if the millions of people inside it cannot trust a single word spoken to them, that society is already in irreversible ruins.
Yeah, it's already collapsed from the inside.
To understand how this corruption takes root, let's look closer at their devils. How should we practically understand this concept in our modern, everyday context?
Did we realize that a devil might wear a perfectly tailored suit and sit at the head of a corporate boardroom?
That's a chilling image.
In the deep context of this phenomenon, devils represent any organized circle of complicity. We often mistakenly personify evil as something strictly supernatural, but here it is profoundly, dangerously social. It could easily be a corrupt boss demanding highly unethical accounting practices, a blinding financial interest that heavily incentivizes lying to the public, or simply cynical longtime friends who constantly advise you not to be naive and push you to compromise your core values.
Oh, I've seen that happen.
Right. They are the deeply entrenched social network that perfectly rationalizes the mask and makes blatant hypocrisy feel like a brilliant, pragmatic career move.
That is such a vital ground-level reframing of how influence works. We face this kind of highly subtle peer pressure constantly in our adult lives. You might enter a new career or environment with high, unbroken ideals, and very quickly, older, supposedly wiser colleagues pull you aside in the break room.
Let me tell you how it really works.
Yes. They say, look, all that ethics stuff is really nice for a college philosophy class, but out here in the real world, you have to play the game to survive. They masterfully reframe moral compromise as mature pragmatism. Those soft, assuring voices, dressed up as helpful mentors, are exactly the circles of complicity the revelation is fiercely warning us about. They don't aggressively force you, they gently, logically guide you away from your integrity.
It's incredibly subtle.
It really is. Now, embedded deep within this breakdown is a powerful dual warning. What is the ultimate defining test it presents to the individual navigating this?
Who exactly are you when absolutely no one is watching?
The hardest question of all.
It is. The revelation simultaneously warns society to fiercely beware of empty, manipulative words, but perhaps more importantly, it warns the individual to fiercely and jealously guard their solitude.
Okay.
For a genuine integrated person, solitude brings deep accountability and lasting peace. It is a necessary time to recalibrate and realign with truth. But for the two-faced person, solitude is a terrifying void.
Because they have to face themselves.
Exactly. As we saw, they fundamentally cannot handle it, so their so-called alone time is instantly converted into a frantic planning session for more deception with their toxic circle. The ultimate undeniable test of your true character is the quality, peace, and honesty of your isolation.
It places such a heavy emphasis on the profound, almost urgent necessity of quiet, unmedicated introspection. Today, we have engineered a highly overstimulated world where we literally never have to be alone with our own thoughts.
We're always plugged in.
We really are. If we feel even a terrifying millisecond of quiet, we instantly plug in a podcast, scroll a brightly colored feed, or urgently message a group chat. We are constantly, frantically running from the silence precisely because the silence bluntly asks us who we really are. Choosing to take just 10 minutes a day to sit with absolutely no digital or social distractions is perhaps the most deeply courageous, radical moral act you can perform in the modern world.
I couldn't agree more.
There is a very specific, subtle detail in the mechanics of their behavior about exactly when they speak their mockery. What does that exact timing reveal about their psychology?
Well, why do bullies usually only laugh when they have an audience backing them up?
Because they're cowards on their own.
Exactly. The revelation explicitly shows that they only boldly declare, "We are mockers," after they have safely, securely entered the presence of their devils. This sequence vividly reveals the inherent, pathetic cowardice of mockery.
It requires a safe space.
Yes, it requires a highly supportive, heavily insulated environment to provide the absolute illusion of courage. They do not dare mock the sincere believers to their faces in the light of day. They carefully wait until the doors are bolted shut. Toxic companionship literally manufactures toxic words, providing the artificial groupthink bravery needed to vocalize their deeply held contempt.
It perfectly and precisely illustrates the exact mechanics of modern mob mentality. You see people online say the most horrific, violently cruel things from within the absolute safety of a nameless, faceless digital echo chamber.
Things they would never say in person.
Never. They wouldn't have the actual courage to say it looking into someone's physical eyes. The presence of a toxic, cheering audience artificially emboldens them, pumping them full of unearned confidence. It makes you realize that true toxicity is almost rarely a solo act. It is almost always a collaborative, theatrical performance designed for applause.
So true.
When you step back and look closely at the two completely opposing claims they make, "we believe" and "we are mockers," the logical contradiction is incredibly stark. How does a single human mind hold both?
How can a single human heart contain both the claim of ultimate faith and the sneering mockery of it?
It seems impossible.
It is mathematically, logically, and spiritually impossible unless words themselves have been entirely, violently stripped of all inherent meaning.
Okay.
When sacred values and profound truths are reduced to mere tactical stepping stones for temporary social leverage, it is a loud declaration of total spiritual bankruptcy. They fundamentally cannot genuinely engage with faith or truth, so they cheaply mimic it.
Wait, so the mockery isn't a show of power or intellect at all? It's actually a white flag admitting they have no real arguments.
Yes, absolutely. Sarcasm is very often the final, desperate refuge of the intellectually and morally defeated. When you have absolutely no substantive truth to stand on and no coherent worldview to defend, the only tool left in your arsenal is to try and aggressively tear down the person who does. Mockery is simply the hollow sound of moral bankruptcy, desperately trying to disguise itself as intellectual confidence.
That completely strips away the intimidation factor of cynics. The next time you encounter someone aggressively mocking your core values, your earnest efforts, or your genuine enthusiasm, you don't have to feel defensive or small. You can clearly recognize it for exactly what it is.
A massive white flag.
Exactly. They are loudly admitting to you that they do not possess the emotional or intellectual depth to meet you where you are, so they are trying to drag you down to where they are.
Right.
Drawing out the ultimate core human lesson from all of this deep psychological profiling, what is the true opposite of this fragmented behavior?
Is absolute flawless perfection the only opposite of hypocrisy?
No, it can't be. Nobody is perfect.
No. And that is an incredibly crucial distinction to make. The true opposite of hypocrisy is not flawless perfection. It is raw consistency.
Consistency, I like
A
that.
straightforward, honest person makes plenty of mistakes. They stumble, they fail, they act selfishly at times, but they do not actively build a highly complex double life to hide it.
Right.
Hypocrisy is so uniquely destructive because it systematically removes the single unifying moral standard by which a person can hold themselves accountable. When you possess multiple tailored masks, you possess multiple shifting standards, inevitably leading to a hopelessly fragmented, broken self. True consistency allows for the space to apologize and grow, whereas hypocrisy prevents growth entirely.
It really boils down to the simple, incredibly grounding piece of everyday integrity. It is the deep, exhaling relief of knowing you are the exact same fundamentally flawed but honest person sitting at the chaotic dinner table with your family as you are sitting in a high-pressure boardroom with your boss.
Exactly the same
Yeah,
person.
you might be a struggling person in both of those rooms, but you are the exact same person. You don't have to desperately manage and manipulate different versions of reality. That baseline consistency is the absolute bedrock foundation of any genuine, lasting inner peace.
That's the only way to live freely.
Focusing practically on how we actually build and protect that consistency in our own lives, what does this behavioral cycle tell us about who we choose to align with in secret?
If you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, who is currently shaping your inner voice.
That's a confronting thought.
It is. The revelation places the absolute definitive loyalty with you, strictly and exclusively in the camp of the toxic influences. This demands that we constantly, ruthlessly audit our own secret circles. Who do we genuinely laugh with when all the doors are closed and the cameras are off? Who do we share our unvarnished, raw secrets with? What specific kind of cynical jokes do we quietly tolerate in private? Because those intensely private circles, those hidden secret allegiances, will inevitably and powerfully shape the neurology of our public tongue and the ultimate final reality of our character.
It sounds like we all urgently need to conduct a comprehensive friendship audit. We need to look closely at our closest, most trusted confidants and ask the hard questions. Do these specific people actually align with my deepest, truest, most aspirational values?
Are they making you better?
Right. When I am alone with them, do I naturally become more sincere, more patient, and more grounded? Or do I quickly become more cynical, more judgmental, and more arrogant? Because if your private circle implicitly requires you to mock the very things you secretly respect just to fit in, you are slowly, willingly being poisoned by the company you keep.
It's a slow poison for sure.
To conclude this deep thematic breakdown, where does this relentless cycle of deception and mockery ultimately lead the individual?
Can an unaddressed lie ever stay stagnant? Or does it inevitably metastasize?
It always spreads.
The tragic psychological equation presented in this revelation is flawlessly clear and absolutely inevitable.
Yeah.
The desperate human desire for social safety, when intimately combined with toxic private interests, creates the mask.
Right.
Wearing the mask constantly causes severe psychological tension, cognitive dissonance, and exhausting paranoia. This unbearable tension is temporarily relieved by the anesthetic of mockery. But that mockery systematically and ruthlessly kills all remaining respect for the truth, leaving the person entirely defenseless against their own internal decay. It is a terminal disease of the soul if it is not violently interrupted and cured by radical, painful honesty.
It is the ultimate tragic narrative arc of losing oneself entirely to the performance. You start by putting on the mask just to survive a difficult room, but eventually the mask eats the face. You become nothing more than the performance itself, leaving only a hollow, echoing shell behind.
It's a sobering reality.
Thanks for this deep explanation. Words should be mirrors of our truth, not masks for our survival. Hypocrisy isn't just a social failing, it is a psychological prison. Ultimately, the company we keep in secret defines the reality of our character. If your innermost thoughts and secret conversations were suddenly broadcast to the world, would the people who love you even recognize the person they see every day? That's it for this episode of Insights. If you found this reflection helpful, follow the show and join us next time as we continue verse by verse in the Qur'an. Until then, take one idea from this verse into your day.